In 1845, two British ships sailed into the Canadian Arctic. They carried over 100 men, all seeking a new route across the top of the world. The ice closed around them, and the ships never returned. What followed became one of the great frozen mysteries of exploration. The year was 1845. The age of sail was nearing its twilight, yet imperial ambitions still stretched across the globe. Britain ruled the seas. Exploration stood as both science and symbol. The unknown edges of the map still tempted governments and adventurers alike. The Arctic was one of those edges. A blank, white void above North America. For decades, European navigators searched for the Northwest Passage. A frozen sea route that would cut travel time between the Atlantic and Pacific. Many ships had tried. Some survived. Others did not. The Arctic had already claimed lives. But the dream remained. It was seen as both a national duty and a scientific pursuit. Sir John Franklin was chosen to lead the next attempt. He was a naval officer, an explorer, a veteran of earlier polar journeys. At nearly 60 years old, he was experienced but no longer young. Still, the Admiralty trusted him. He was given two ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Both vessels were strong. Reinforced hulls. Steam engines. Food supplies meant to last years. The latest technology of the British fleet. Confidence was high. The crews included skilled sailors, officers, and specialists. Over 120 men in total. They carried books, instruments, clothing for the cold. They also carried written hopes of honor, discovery, and progress. Families said goodbye in crowded ports. Newspapers praised the mission. Success seemed inevitable. The ships departed England in May 1845. They sailed first to Greenland. There, the last messages home were written. Whalers later saw the ships sailing westward into the Canadian Arctic. After that, silence. No further word reached Britain. Months passed. Then years. At first, this silence caused little concern. Arctic expeditions were slow. Letters sometimes never arrived. But eventually, anxiety grew. Franklin's wife pushed for rescue efforts. The Admiralty hesitated. Then changed course. Search ships were sent. They found only fragments. Traces of camps. Clues frozen into the landscape. But no living men. The story of the Erebus and Terror faded into rumor and uncertainty. In the mid-19th century, the Arctic was more than a place. It symbolized the limits of empire. A frontier that did not yield. The disappearance of Franklin's expedition marked a turning point. It showed that even the greatest naval power in the world could vanish into ice without a trace. The last known record placed the expedition trapped in sea ice near King William Island. From there, the trail dissolved into speculation. What happened next remained hidden beneath snow, wind, and time. An Arctic expedition had sailed into history and never returned. As the search for Franklin intensified, fragments of the missing story slowly surfaced. Rescue missions combed the Canadian Arctic. They followed shorelines, questioned indigenous hunters, collected scraps of wood and metal. They looked for the ships, for the men, for any living trace. Most of what they found were signs of struggle, left behind in the frozen wilderness. Winter after winter, the ships of the expedition had remained locked in ice. The Arctic climate was unforgiving. Ice closed in early, released late. Some years, it did not release at all. The men on board faced months of darkness. The cold was constant. Supplies dwindled slowly. Hope eroded more quickly. Officers kept order. They recorded daily routines. They continued scientific work. They believed the ice would break, that the ships would sail again. But the seasons did not cooperate. Conditions worsened. Illness spread. Lead-tainted provisions and scurvy likely weakened bodies and minds alike. Isolation deepened the strain. Outside observers only pieced this together much later. Inuit accounts revealed glimpses of contact. Stories of starving sailors dragging sledges across the ice. Men moving slowly, wrapped in rags. Ships crushed or abandoned. But these stories were passed verbally. Western searchers often ignored or misunderstood them. The Admiralty mounted numerous expeditions. Some went east. Some west. Some wintered over, repeating the same brutal endurance their lost countrymen had faced. The mystery became a national obsession. Newspapers speculated. Families waited. Funds were raised. Ships sailed until the Arctic became crisscrossed with British search routes. More clues appeared. A note discovered years later on King William Island described the abandonment of the ships in 1848. By then, Franklin himself was already dead. Leadership had passed to others. The remaining men planned to march south toward the mainland. They never made it. Personal belongings were recovered: buttons, forks, fragments of journals. Items that spoke quietly of normal life interrupted by disaster. The cold preserved these objects better than it preserved memory. The expedition slipped further from certainty. There were no survivors to explain what truly happened. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Other routes opened. Steam replaced sail. Empires shifted. Scientific exploration evolved. The lost expedition became a distant story. A tragic footnote in the history of exploration. Frozen, incomplete. Locked away like the ships themselves. Yet the unanswered questions remained. Where exactly had the ships gone down? How had the men lived, and died, in their final months? What decisions had sealed their fate? The Arctic kept its secrets. The silence of the ice was absolute. And the traces of the Franklin expedition lay scattered across a white, indifferent landscape. The climax of the story unfolded far from witnesses. It happened in the bleak terrain around King William Island. The ships had been trapped for nearly 2 years. The ice did not break. Supplies were no longer enough. Disease and hunger spread. Leadership weakened as men fell ill. The morale of the expedition eroded like brittle wood under pressure. In April 1848, the decision was made. The ships would be abandoned. It was the final, desperate act of men who saw no other path to survival. They prepared sledges, loaded boats, gathered what food and tools remained, then stepped off the relative shelter of the vessels and onto the frozen landscape. Their goal was to reach the Canadian mainland. To find rescue, or at least civilization. The men marched south. Progress was slow. The terrain was rough. Ice ridges broke their path. Snow blinded their steps. Weakness grew. Some collapsed along the way. Others continued on, driven by duty or instinct. But the Arctic offered no mercy. Every mile cost strength they no longer had. Later discoveries showed evidence of camps, remnants of fires, scattered bones, human remains that marked the route of the final march. The greatest losses came quietly, one by one, without ceremony, under gray skies, on empty ice. No one recorded the last words spoken. No chronicle described the end. The ships themselves sank into the ice-cold water. Slowly. Silently. Their masts vanished beneath the frozen surface. The Erebus. The Terror. Once symbols of the Royal Navy's power. Now swallowed by the Arctic Sea. They rested there for more than a century and a half. Preserved in darkness. The Franklin expedition ceased to exist as a living venture. It became an absence. Families in Britain never received final confirmation. Only hints. Only fragments. The greatest consequence was not just loss of life. It was the creation of a historical void. A story without witnesses. A tragedy with missing pages. Search missions brought home relics. But not the men. Not the truth. Over time, the details slipped further from public consciousness. Other events overshadowed it. Other wars. Other discoveries. But the Arctic held on to the last chapter. It would not release it until modern technology rediscovered the wrecks in the 21st century, long after the world had moved on. The climax of the expedition was not a single dramatic moment. It was a slow, inevitable descent into silence. The end came without ceremony. Without recognition. Only the wind, the ice, and the fading footsteps of men who vanished into the white. The story closes in the Arctic. There is no noise. Only wind across ice. The men are gone. Their ships are gone. Their voices are gone. The campfires went out. The last footsteps froze into the snow. Then the snow covered them. Years passed. Decades passed. The world forgot. Families waited. Letters never came. Names faded from memory. The maps changed. Empires changed. The ice remained. A few relics returned south. Buttons. Spoons. Scraps of uniform cloth. They looked small in museum glass. They carried no sound. They carried only absence. No one heard the final conversations. No one marked the graves. The Arctic kept the truth. Winter after winter, the ice closed again. It sealed the story. It erased the trail. Sailors once stood on wooden decks. They looked across the wide horizon. They believed they would return. But the ship sank. The masts disappeared. The sea swallowed their shadows. Silence replaced them. A silence that lasted generations. People spoke less about the voyage. The headlines stopped. The names drifted away. Today the place is still remote. Still empty. Still cold. There are no monuments on the ice. No crowds. No sound. Only history buried beneath snow. Only memory fading into distance. An Arctic expedition once sailed here. It never returned. And the world slowly forgot. If this story mattered to you, consider subscribing. More forgotten history is coming.